Thank you, Dirk, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the kind words. I feel honored to be delivering this presentation here today. I've structured it in 3 parts. So first, I will give a small introduction connecting the theme of the presentation with today's meeting. Then I will follow presenting the main findings of the research on national tourism policies, and to conclude, I will go through the recommendations of the study. So not working. Okay, thanks. As you know, the SDGs are universal, and they provide with a unified vision on the issues related to sustainable development for all of us. In fact, countries and tourism stakeholders have already started incorporating the SDGs into national policies and actions. Tourism is playing a role in this process. So far, we see that 85% of the voluntary national reviews on the implementation of the SDGs at national level, those are reports that countries submit voluntarily to the United Nations Economic and Social Council. So the VNRs, 85% of those make reference to tourism. And they do so notably with regards or in connection to employment, SDG 8, and sustainable consumption and production, SDG 12. That is no surprise, as these are goals which actually include specific targets for the tourism sector. Next. In particular, it is under SDG 12 that we find the target which is most connected to the topic which we are discussing here today, measurement. Therefore, we thought it could be interesting to share some insights on the research project and the baseline report on integrating SCP into national tourism policies, which UNWTO released in collaboration with UN Environment earlier this year. I had the privilege to support directly the development of the baseline report, but it was a joint effort from the department. So I will also be speaking for my colleagues, Mariana Astori, Virka Valentin, Abbas, Alisa De, Lorna Artantio, and others. Next, please. The objective of the research project was to understand how SCP is being integrated in sectorial policies for tourism at the national level. And the project included a survey, the review and coding of national tourism policies, and a series of interviews. All in all, the sample studied was 101 countries. Next. SCP is a broad concept which is rooted in resource efficiency. And while SCP is very relevant for tourism, as the sector needs to decouple its growth from environmental degradation, we realized that it was a complex concept for tourism stakeholders to understand. So the first thing that we did was to break down the concept of SCP into actionable elements. And we did this based on the monitoring methodology of the One Planet Network, which is an implementation mechanism for SDG 12. The identification of the so-called SCP impact areas, which you see in the screen, already made us feel closer to SCP. We could understand it. And for instance, when looking at sustainability reporting from the private sector, we realized that there was action taking place. We now needed to understand how tourism policies were addressing these areas. Next. So we can say that nowadays, all the national tourism policies, at least the ones reviewed, include references to sustainability, notably as part of their objectives or vision. So that message has been passed on. However, only 55% refer to sustainability in detail. Only 55% refer to sustainability as a cross-cutting element with more holistic interpretations. 67% include references to resource efficiency, and when talking about those countries that were stronger in the commitment to sustainability, so the 55%, this percentage would go up to 90%. So I guess the connection between sustainability and resource efficiency is also very clear. 64% connect sustainability with competitiveness, with the competitiveness of the tourism sector, which shows that sustainability is in the process of becoming a competitive advantage. In fact, those countries that were part of this 64% were among the top scorers of the competitiveness index for travel and tourism of the WEF. When going a bit deeper and analyzing the presence of SCP impact areas in the national tourism policies, the findings suggest a certain level of awareness with regards to these areas, For example, biodiversity protection would be the area referred to in more of the policies reviewed, 96%. On the contrary, greenhouse gas emissions reduction would be the area being least referred to, with only 42% of policies referring to it. However, the majority of references are not very detailed, and not every policy makes references to the 5 of them. Actually, only 30% of the policies of the whole sample do so. Moreover, when taking the references to policy instruments for the implementation of action in these 5 areas, the scores are much lower. So almost all the policies, 98%, make references to policy instruments on at least one SCP impact area, but none of them makes references to instruments for 3 or more of these areas. And except for the policy instruments related to biodiversity conservation, the references to policy instruments addressing other impact areas are very scarce. And most of the instruments are voluntary and regulatory in nature. Next, please. Something else that we did was to look further at references to monitoring tools in policies and evidence for implementation in line with the SDG target 12.b. And we found that references to action plans are mentioned or appear in 79% of national tourism policies. And there are also many references to the need to develop mechanisms and tools to monitor the impacts of tourism. They are commonly found, even very much found, in 95% of the policies reviewed. That'd be the gray bar. And among the policies reviewed, on the contrary, it's only 56% that actually make references to the need to monitor environmental aspects of sustainable development. That'd be the green bar. And the evidence available, as we all know, is mainly related to the economic performance of the sector. There are few countries disclosing data related to the environmental aspects. What we did was to review the official websites of NTAs in search for publicly available progress reports related to the implementation of policies. And it was possible to find some evidence related to the implementation of national tourism policies, I mean the economic components of those policies. But only in 11% we found evidence for the implementation of actions related to environmental issue areas. Our conclusion was that there might be an implementation gap. Actually, we feel there is probably one, but we could not be 100% conclusive, because also we saw that 74% of the national tourism policies speak of decentralization. That gives us hope. Maybe action is taking place at subnational level. What were the recommendations? So we had 5. First, we recommended that the SDGs are used as a guiding framework and that SDG 12 is prioritized. Why? Because we feel that by speaking the same language, the SDGs, we can define policy objectives that go beyond political cycles. This also has potential to enhance cross-governmental collaboration. And in fact, we were recommending to prioritize SDG 12 because SDG 12 is cross-cutting. Therefore, you could achieve multiplier effects. The second recommendation was to outline and develop SCP policy instruments. So embark on a participatory identification of instruments to define a right mix of instruments, economic, voluntary, and regulatory. We feel that can enhance the coordination between tourism and environmental authorities and stakeholders. And we also recommended a proactive communication to the stakeholders on what are the instruments that are there for them to implement. In some cases, they don't know. Third recommendation was to support the regular and timely measurement of impacts, because we definitely believe that this can enhance the accountability for policy implementation. We feel this should be enabled at the national level, but with subnational level at the forefront of implementation. Then the fourth recommendation would be to incorporate geospatial data to visualize, because by visualizing we better understand, and with better understanding we define better policies. We also can support more integrated planning and participatory processes with visualization. And through localization, we can connect different data layers, local and national level, building more comprehensive data sets. The last one was to embrace innovative approaches, in particular circularity. Circularity is a concept that requires constant thinking, rethinking, and optimizing, and is found in robust measurement. So we believe it can help us lead the transformation towards decoupling. Next. So with these 5 recommendations, I mean, you've seen they were formulated from the angle or framed from the angle of SCP, because that was the scope of the report, but we find them relevant beyond SCP in connection to policy implementation. As you have seen, measurement is to a great deal the solution to many of the challenges, or at least the way to start finding the solutions to some challenges. So I therefore hope that you find this useful and supportive to your work, and remain available for any clarifications and discussion. Thank you.